So today we're going to talk about anxious avoidant relationships, 5 reasons why it's so hard, and it's probably not going to work out in the end. And we're going to do this from the perspective of an anxious attachment style person, because that's what I am, and that's probably what you are watching this video. And you're probably, like I was, asking yourself questions about why isn't this working? And why do I consistently have problems in my relationships? Number 1, we anxious attachers have a fear of abandonment. I'm sure you know that feeling, constantly checking in to make sure that you haven't done anything wrong, that your partner's happy, that you're doing everything you can for the relationship. This is something that we do a lot. Now, if you're with another anxious attacher or a secure attachment style person, that's probably not going to be too big a deal, you checking in to make sure that you're doing enough and everything is okay. But if you're with an avoidant attachment person, you've got really big problems. Giving reassurance and discussing these things is quite difficult for an avoidant attachment style person, your partner, if they are that way inclined. And it means that by constantly seeking that affirmation and validation from them, you're actually going to be pushing them away a little bit further. But the avoidant partner will often seek physical and mental space, time to themselves. They live sometimes within their own heads. They might seem disengaged or detached. It plays into our insecurities and worries that the relationship isn't working. But in reality, nothing is happening. It's just the avoidant being themselves and seeking mental space and wanting time for themselves. It's how we interpret that as anxious attachers that causes the problem. But it is a problem, and it's a serious problem in a relationship. Number 2, we anxious attachers need reassurance. Almost constantly in relationships. We're often seeking validation and reassurance from our partners to make sure that the relationship is okay and that we are secure within that relationship. But the avoidant partner can become frustrated by this, and actually it can make them feel really tired, constantly having to give this validation to their partner and reassurance. They may not know or understand why we're seeking this, and it might feel to them like it's a broken record. Yes, everything's okay. No, you haven't done anything wrong. And this is mentally exhausting for an avoidant person. After all, the attachment styles that we exhibit in adulthood come from our childhoods and the way that our parents treated us. So the avoidant attacher probably didn't have any reassurance or validation when they were a child. And they probably didn't have very much deep feeling of security or comfort either. So it's very difficult for them to understand why us anxious attachers need this constant affirmation, validation, security, because they've never had it. So it's like we're speaking different languages. Our needs and their needs are irreconcilable in many cases. Number 3, we anxious attachers can be clingy. We have a constant need for closeness and proximity, both physical and mental, in our relationships. And we also struggle to maintain healthy boundaries because we're afraid that if we do something wrong or we don't comply, then we'll end up alone. And in my experience, I kind of want the honeymoon period to carry on forever. I want it to be like that. And if it's not like that, then I think, oh, something's wrong. Now, we have to learn to accept that it's not going to be like the beginning of a relationship for the whole relationship. The dynamic of the relationship changes as you learn to coexist and work together and all of those things. But we still want to maintain as much of the early intimacy and romance and connection and feeling and security that we felt at the beginning. Now, avoidant partners will crave that intimacy and closeness at the beginning of a relationship. After all, they are often very loving people, just as we are, and they crave that special connection and closeness with a partner. Avoidant people are not the enemy. They are still good people who want the same things that we want deep inside. But as the relationship develops, their long-held and deep-seated fears of abandonment will come to the surface and will eventually overcome their desire for closeness and love, and will eventually become so strong that they will start drawing boundaries in the relationship. Now, these boundaries will seem new to the anxious attacher because we hadn't seen them before until this point of the relationship. And the avoidant partner does this to protect themselves from what they perceive to be the inevitable abandonment and failure of the relationship that's going to happen at some point. And we must remember that it was impossible to spot this at the beginning of the relationship because it wasn't there yet. Only at a certain point did the avoidant partner start to realize I could be abandoned, subconsciously or otherwise, because those boundaries weren't there at the beginning of a relationship. But 6 months in, a year into a relationship, maybe sooner, this is when those fears rise to the surface for the avoidant partner, and this is where the behavioral change happens. And it can seem sudden and devastating. Number 4, We anxious attachers are usually a bit too dependent on our partners in our relationships. We can put a tremendous amount of pressure on our avoidant partners without even realizing that we're doing it. Avoidant partners are often extremely self-sufficient, and they're usually like this because they were let down by their primary caregivers, which meant they had to learn to manage emotional trauma and running their lives on their own from an early age. So they can't just change that. They can't just give that up. Because in their minds, what would happen if I became codependent and reliant on my partner, and then one day it comes to an end? That's a risk that an avoidant partner just can't take. This is very difficult for us anxious attachers to take. Our instinct is to share the load with our partner and to lean on them when we need to, and we want them to lean on us when they need to. That's just not going to happen in the long term in this relationship dynamic. At least it won't happen without the avoidant doing some serious emotional and psychological heavy lifting, which could take a very long time. Number 5, we anxious attachers are extremely sensitive to our partner's mood and behavior, and we often interpret it incorrectly. We overthink absolutely everything, don't we? We're hypersensitive and we read between the lines of everything, always looking for hidden meanings. What we crave is explicit communication all the time. Avoidant attachers just don't communicate like this. From an avoidance perspective, if they told you everything was okay last week and nothing's changed, then everything's still okay. But that's not how we work, is it? We need to be told that everything's okay much more regularly than that. Avoidant attachers will also spend an awful lot of their time in their own heads, not really communicating anything at all. And it's not because there's a problem, which we anxious attachers naturally assume there must be something wrong and it's something that we've done. But actually, no, it's just the way the avoidant is. They just disappear into their own minds, and that can be for very long periods of time. But inevitably, we anxious attachers will see this as a big disconnect, and it will become a really big problem over time. And it will feel like we're growing apart. And what do? We look for validation. We look for reassurance. We endlessly question, is everything okay? Is it something that I've done? And this just pushes them away still further. We're not giving them the time to exist in their own minds as they naturally would do. And from there, it turns into a vicious cycle that just spins out of control into the inevitable end of the relationship. This is not about judging anxious attachment style people or avoidant attachment style people. There's lots of bad press on the internet about avoidant attachment style people, but I think it's much healthier to try and understand why they are what they are. If they were with the right person, they could have a really fruitful, meaningful, rewarding long-term relationship. But it's very difficult for this combination to work. And ultimately we have to decide, is this relationship going to work in the long term? Are we going to be happy as a couple in the long run? If you're an anxious person and you're struggling in a relationship and you started to suspect that it's because your partner is avoidant, there's all this behavior that you can't understand and you can't explain, and it doesn't make any sense. Well, it won't make any sense to you. It didn't make any sense to me. And I drove myself crazy trying to work out how I could fix it, and I couldn't fix it. When I discovered attachment styles and I started reading all of the comments and I started learning about avoidant attachment styles, the main comment you get is, if you're in a relationship with an avoidant partner, run. And they are the devil, they're the worst thing. Well, they're not. You can't assume that just because you're seeing this strange behavior that they don't love you. That's not the case at all. But what you do have to look at is, what can you cope with in your relationship? From my personal experience, I tried so hard to change my natural anxious attachment style to fit my partner, but it was very, very destructive for me. And ultimately, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do enough work in the relationship to make it work. So I had to leave. And I wanted to give you that perspective while you're in the relationship, while you're asking these questions. So that's why we did 5 reasons why it probably won't work between you, the anxious attacher, and your avoidant partner.